right, wonderful. Well, how was lunch? Everybody in person?
Great.
Delicious. Hopefully you all got a chance to meet some of the B Network leaders, and hopefully how was lunch online, Maria?
Very good.
Yes, Maria.
Yes.
Maria. Excellent. Maria hosted an online lunch for all of our virtual participants. So I'm really excited to kick off our first afternoon session, which is our session focused on curriculum development and teaching innovation. And I'm really excited to be co-moderating this session with Kristen Joyce, who is our chair of teaching and curriculum innovation on the B Academics Board and also on the faculty at University of Florida. So Chris and I will be tag teaming this session together, but I'm really excited that we're going to have the opportunity to hear from 4 different faculty, practitioners, and teams, collaborative teams of faculty who I think are doing really exciting work around innovative pedagogy, teaching about B Corps, benefit corporations, business as a force for good, as well as I think some really innovative teaching models that we can look to as examples for thinking about how can we really engage, empower, inspire our students to serve as change makers as we're preparing them to go off into industry. And so we're going to start with our first team presentation. And so I'm really excited about this first presentation. This is an interdisciplinary team of faculty from James Madison University, Drexel University, with disciplines ranging from graphic design, product design, engineering, and merchandising. And I think this is a really exciting opportunity for us to hear about a really interdisciplinary collaborative approach to building a play-based set of learning experiences to empower students to address climate change and broader sustainability challenges. So I'm going to hand it over to Chris Baeza, who leads this team, and give you a chance to kick us off and introduce your team. So thank you so much for joining us. We're delighted to have you.
Okay. Thank you. Thank you so much for having us. And this is really exciting for us to be here with you all. And today we are presenting quickly the work that we've been doing at Drexel and JMU around really empowering students to lead climate resilient change, but change in general, right? And, you know, really acknowledging the fact that the major crises of our times are a result of how we conduct business. And my discipline is related to the fashion industry, and that's the lens through which, you know, I bring to the table to this group effort. And we're gonna, with that, we'll get started. Here's the team that you're gonna be hearing from. So Kyle is with us online. Justin couldn't be with us because he's off doing fabulous things at another university right now, but he's definitely with us in spirit. So this is the project team. We've been working together over a year, developing these strategies.
All right, I'm Carissa, and we have Raja here as well, also from Drexel University, and Kyle is with us online, and he'll be chiming in. So our group has come together because we need to empower the next generation of professionals, our students in the classroom, to lead change for climate resiliency and a more sustainable and just future. So as educators, that's something that we care deeply about in our collective classrooms, and we've come together as a project team to work together towards that end. So our theme for today is change by design, not disaster. And we recognize as educators in design disciplines that the approaches used for sustainability in higher ed are dated, and they lack current and emerging practical tools for designing with communities for resiliency. So as designers, we have great impact in climate change, and so the ventures that we come together to create with our students and with stakeholders have a huge impact towards that end. So our focus is developing mindsets. And how do we do that? We develop mindsets and skill sets to disaster-proof our entrepreneurial ventures. So what we're going to share today are, it did not go, there we go. All right, a suite of tools, and each of us are sort of tag teaming to talk about that a little bit. We'll talk a little bit about Cli-Fi world building, ethical entrepreneurship frameworks, speculative brainstorming, and scenario analysis, all of those towards the end of developing more resilient ventures within our classroom contexts. And so I'm going to hand it over to Chris, who's going to talk a little bit about the ethical business model canvas that she has been working on.
Okay, thank you. So with climate change and social justice, injustices across the world, the motivation to instill more ecological and ethical values in the future creative workforce is very clear to all of us. And we recognize in an academic setting, especially in design disciplines that we all represent, it can be very overwhelming. The United Nations Decade of Education for Sustainable Development outlined clear directions more than 15 years ago of how to structure higher education and how that we need to take a more holistic approach to graduating critical thinkers who are entering industry in an age of continual environmental and societal uncertainty. In 2010, on a trip to Kenya, I had the honor of having a private meeting with Muhammad Yunus, which was the impetus for much of my research and my activity in the classroom. I was inspired by his clarity and conviction about the role that business actually plays in our world, and his belief in the possibility of creating a new economy with a new set of rules, one that redefines the way people perceive success, which is, of course, aligned with B Corp, yes? So within my discipline, I am teaching students who want to be part of this $2.4 trillion global industry. I really believe it's time for educators to initiate conversations about where we are and where we want to be. And that really defines, Raja's going to talk about that in a bit. And how do we define and measure goodness and rightness of the products being designed, about responsibility and decisions and consequences along the design process. So for centuries, philosophers have grappled with these same questions, and yet a lot of the ethical frameworks have not come into these design disciplines, yet we're all sitting on, we're all interacting with products that were created by designers. So we seek to really inject within a design discipline an ethical framework, and then for making decisions, and at the same time, the business ethical canvas, which was inspired by your traditional business model canvas, social entrepreneurship canvas, and the pillars of B Corp. And so we align everything that we do, and our students at the end not only have to critique and evaluate their products that they're creating, but it must then fit within the canvas of an ethical business model. And in doing so, we have various speakers from different B Corp organizations come in throughout the term, and they walk through this process. And I'm going to hand it over to Raja to talk about another tool that leads us to this.
Yeah, so one of the things that we are really committed to is looking at sort of ethics that are applied and eventually are sort of meted out through canvases and frameworks like this, which align with the B Corp pillars. But one of the places that we start is looking at the context in which we're designing. And oftentimes it's really hard for people who feel like they have amazing ventures and ideas and inventions and services that can change the world to really critique them and scrutinize them from the lens of ethical impact and looking at the harms that might emerge there. But it's really easy for us to do those things in fictional context. So we actually look a lot at like speculative fiction, and in particular climate fiction, because it allows us to tease out sort of how choices that we're making as businesses and designers can impact the world for good, but also for harm at an extreme, and looking at a long range view. So not looking at impacts of tomorrow or like next quarter, but really looking at next century. And so we created an interactive activity. It's actually in classroom activity that is a collaborative world building game, which allows students to sort of position a lot of these tropes that are evident in science fiction and climate fiction that are looking at things like species extinction, apocalypse, climate collapse, extractive colonialism, and looking at how those impacts across the ecology and society, and really sort of tease those out in analysis of existing narratives, but also creating our own narratives as well. And so what you're looking at here is sort of like the underlying framework for our climate futures speculative fiction game. If you can go to the next slide, Carissa. What we do is we sort of look at some of those tensions that are evident in our existing society and our existing world, but also very popular in terms of like fictional narratives that are written in on screen. And we sort of look at what are the sort of key tensions that are defining the world. And those can be ones that we are pulling from the list and sort of creating our own world, or we might be using this as an analysis tool and sort of figuring out what are sort of the overarching things. And we sort of outline and figure out where the world is in that moment in time. We're sort of understanding what this multiverse is sort of based on. And once we understand that and sort of agree on the definitions and how that's evident in the thing, you'll notice here that ecotopia and social stratification were the tensions that were identified in looking at Snowpiercer, where ecotopia was like at the least possible and social stratification was the most possible, right? So if we are in a world in which the ecotopia or this idea of living in ecotopia is at a very low level, but we're also in a world of very high social stratification, what might that look like, right? And if we look across the world at Snowpiercer, we can see how that's structurally supported through design systems and tools and social systems that are there. And once we're able to situate that, we're able to identify what are some of these objects of design or by design that you're there to support that, and how do those benefit or harm the people that exist there. So in this particular example, it's a student example, students identified sort of the food systems that were on board this train, and they looked at sort of like this nutritive substitute was based on cockroaches, if you haven't seen the thing. They designed these like highly densely nutritious protein bars, or they're really based on like insects and trash, but it was a closed loop system. So from an ecological standpoint, it's very efficient. It's like has the least amount of impact. It satisfies and checks all the boxes. But if you look at what higher society was eating, they were still eating things like fresh fish and cattle and things like that. So it's obviously the social stratification being there meant that you could sort of look at this sort of what seems to be on the surface a holistic nutritionist substitute as something that is not for the benefit of for the benefit of the masses and not for the benefit of everyone. So it gives our students a way to interrogate design objects that are positioned as great things and world-changing things, even if they were their own design artifacts, and really critique them from a lens of what if this was in a different world, or how would this possibly impact for the good or better, and how can we interrogate this a little bit further?
So similar to the methodology that Raja has outlined, we are very concerned with developing mindsets and having students use these tools to iterate further in their design ideas or their entrepreneurial ventures, things that they might be creating in class. And so another way to do that is scenario analysis. And this is a card game that has a mural implementation. So you can do this in class, or you can do it remotely or in a kind of hybrid context, where students draw cards, and these are drivers that are these categories: demographic, economic, technological, environmental. You can create more cards within those contexts relative to whatever the kind of idea that you want to create in your course or your module. But the idea is, as you move through, you draw each of these cards, and depending on more or less of each of those things, like more or less small business, more or less public transport, or access to that, high or low pollution, you create another fictional context, and then you create a scenario for that context. Extrapolating that further, you then propose a climate adaptation. So this was a course that centered on climate adaptation and social venture, with a high and a low response, and those are relate to RCPs as well. So
one more minute.
Okay, all right. Well, I'm going to hand it over to Kyle, who is remote, and we'll talk about the last bit.
So the last part, what we want to do, a lot of the things that we've shown are speculative or either future. So sometimes people might get overwhelmed with all that information and what it may look like. This is an opportunity for the students to take transformational leadership approaches to see what changes need to be made, create a vision, and execute with a group on how we can make change now. So the ideas that have been unearthed can now be put forward through the strategic doing process of stabilizing where do we want to go, as opposed to where the speculative research has shown us we could go, and what are the pathways to get there. And we start off with something very simple, a 15% solution. That's the starting point. What can you do right now that enables you to make change where you don't need a whole bunch of resources, or you do not need authority to make things happen. And the focus there for our students is to engender the whole idea that one individual can make a change that can spark a big result like a movement. So that's where we're hoping to lead our students through, taking them through these different opportunities and these approaches so they can start doing things now in an entrepreneurial spirit. And I'll turn it back over.
So we are going to have to wrap it up there to stay on time. And you've also utilized your Q&A time as well. So I'll encourage folks during the break to reach out to Chris and her team with any questions or feedback, but we're going to keep moving. So can we give thank you so much for sharing that very innovative and I think empowering approach. Yes.
Are you going to share this?
Yes, that is our plan. And so we'll talk more about that at the end, but we're excited to share the slides as well as other teaching resources as part of the follow-up. Absolutely. So thank you for asking. So I'm going to hand it over to Kristen to introduce our next presenter.
Everyone. So next up we have Jaret Waters from Campus B, and he's going to be sharing about the positive impact that virtual internship programs can have, and they're going to be leveraging Campus B's international project-based learning methodology. So next up, Jaret.
Oh, I thought we were doing Sabrina next.
Sabrina's last, but we can do it in whatever order works for folks in the room.
Either order.
Jared, are you ready to go?
Yeah.
Okay.
If that's.
Give me a second. Let me pull your stuff.
Yeah, no worries.
Sorry. Computers. Okay.
Practicing patience here. And we're moving at the
Sometimes the reflection.
at the speed of the Wi-Fi.
Yay, there you go. It's here. All right, go ahead.
Wonderful. Thank you so much for the introduction, and thank you so much for the invite to be here. So my name is Jaret Waters. I am a representative from Campus B, which is an international education company based out of São Paulo, Brazil, and also a certified B Corp. So today I'll be presenting on one of our open enrollment virtual programs that we offer for students, predominantly here in the US. But just to give a little bit more background on Campus B, as I mentioned, we're based out of Brazil, and essentially over the past 12 years, we've accumulated experience in designing and operating international experiences for students throughout Latin America, with a specific focus on customized short-term programming. One of the aspects that I really liked about his presentation this morning was the way in which he described B-Lab as being this sort of convening space that connects the network at large in order to mobilize change. I think one of the things that really guides our work at Campus B links back to a really famous educator known as Paulo Freire, who's a Brazilian, so huge pride of Campus B, who always said that knowledge or education is not about the passing of knowledge from one person to another, but rather creating the conditions for knowledge to be exchanged. And so I think that's really what we try to do with a lot of the programs that we develop, and especially focusing on experiential learning, which really links into the program that I'll be presenting today, the Positive Impact Program. So just a high-level overview, this is a program that was born last year. It's on its third edition at this point. We just wrapped up the fall edition a couple weeks back. So it's an open enrollment program that we offer in-house, 100% virtual, and it brings together students from all over the world to work on impact-focused projects with organizations based out of Brazil. So I say organizations because oftentimes they're either NGOs, social impact businesses, sometimes even government agencies, and we just sort of generally call them our project hosts. And so essentially we have the practicum element to this project, and then we also bring our own academic content to supplement that. Generally, our academic content focuses on areas such as project management, intercultural communication, among some others. And in its current iteration, the program lasts about 6 weeks. One of the elements that I want to focus on, yeah, you can go to the next
slide.
Yeah,
Okay.
that's perfect. Thank you. So as I mentioned, we have the two main elements being the practicum and the academic content that we offer. I think one of the other differentials that I'll get into in a little bit here as well, but I just wanted to highlight here, is that we bring in local Brazilian students. So the program is open globally to students of any country, but generally we focus on the US and the Brazilian market. And having the involvement of local students for us at Campus B is really important. We always kind of reference that oftentimes when students go abroad, it's very easy for them to stick in a bubble. And ironically, in this type of virtual program where students don't travel at all, we feel that they have a more culturally relevant experience by involving these local students than oftentimes many people do when going abroad otherwise. The two aspects, though, that I want to focus on here as it relates to the purposes of this conference for the Positive Impact Program is the fact that this program gives students sort of a front row seat to what it means to use business as a force for good. And also a question of accessibility. I think one of the things that we focus on a lot being B Corps is the customers that we're serving. Particularly international education is oftentimes a very exclusive market. And so we think that that's one of the big value propositions of this type of program.
We're going to see if we can get you a little bit more, a little bit less volume over there.
Oh, no worries. I'll keep trying to project. I'll just like raise the volume, I will too. So on to the first point, as I mentioned, the practicum experience that students gain through this program really gives them the sort of front-facing image as to what it means to be a social impact business. I think that this is really critical for two reasons. First of all, what we see is that it's a really creatively enriching experience for students, given that it's oftentimes the first time that they can understand how business can actually transform the world in a positive way. I have some example project hosts up here. One of the ones that I wanted to highlight is the one in the middle, Baeza. It's a Brazilian company that essentially creates paper products. All of their paper products are biodegradable, and they also build seeds into their products so that once you're done using them, you can plant them and they will continue to grow. I think that this is one of those examples of how this type of experience can be very creatively enriching and stimulating for students. Beyond that, however, I think the second main value point of this is that it allows students, I think that one of the issues oftentimes in looking at the field of social impact are some of the information asymmetries. Oftentimes when students consider careers in this field, they don't even realize that it's a field that you can major in, that you can pursue a career in. And oftentimes those same students that are excluded from international experiences are the ones that are excluded from this type of information, from getting to see what these types of, from getting to see that there is a robust industry that they could develop a career in. And so having the direct contact with these organizations in that sense, I think really instigates students to start to think about potentially pursuing a career in this sense. And then on the second point, if you want to go to the next slide, on accessibility, this is really one of the foundations of a lot of the work that we do at Campus B right now. We realized very early on in our work that there are just not a lot of students here in the US that get to go abroad. So of the traditional college-age population, roughly about 10% will have an international experience while they're in undergrad. This figure drops significantly to less than 1% for Brazilian students. And I think that that's often a question of accessibility that gets overlooked. We often have a very US-centric mindset. And so we really wanted to see in what ways, particularly in the Brazilian market, where those students who do have access to international education often have the highest levels of socioeconomic capital to be able to support those experiences. So first of all, by offering a completely virtual experience, we really open up the potential pool of participants. Those students that don't have the money, the time, the documentation status to be able to cross borders, that's really critical to still be able to get that type of intercultural contact. And secondly, I think One of the strategies that we've developed out is a really robust scholarship program to be able to support students in this program. Given that it's virtual, the costs are relatively low, but beyond that, we offer scholarships to all of the Brazilian participants that are selected, as well as a majority of the international participants that we select. We specifically concentrate these scholarships for underrepresented students in order to make sure that this is their first, that they have kind of a foot in the door for international experiences. And this is critical not just in the sense of international education, but also because of the practicum experience that students gather. This is oftentimes the first professional experience that students have. It's their first contact with what the professional world could look like. And so we're also building out a strategy to be able to extend kind of, or for those students to also get their foot in the door professionally. Awesome. We can go to the last slide then. So,
This guy?
oh no, sorry, second to last. I forgot I had the thing.
Okay.
Next ones. So we will be launching this program once again in the spring. So I encourage you all to follow our website, and then you can also check out more updates on it on social media. It's kind of our virtual learning lab for ourselves to understand more about experiential learning. So we're constantly making adjustments to it as we go. As I mentioned, we really just want this program to be the conditions to allow students to learn from one another and organizations we invite to be part of this program. So with that, I want to thank you all for your attention and time. Open for any questions.
Thank you so much, Jaret.
Thank you.
It's, I think, great to have a practitioner and a B Corp perspective in this conversation. For the sake of time, we're going to keep moving with the presentations, and then again, encourage folks to connect during the break with any questions or discussion, or we'll see if we can recapture some time towards the end. So next, I'll introduce Alice Main from University of New Mexico, and Alice will be sharing with us University of New Mexico's model of B Impact Team, so experiential learning projects focused on working with aspiring and certified B Corps, as well as some of the broader B engagement work that they're doing at University of New Mexico. So I hand it over to you, Alice. Thanks so much for joining us.
Lovely to meet everyone, to be here. My name's Alice. Next slide. We're going to go through these first few pretty quick. But the main topic I'm going to be covering is how we Jessica's impact teams model, implemented it first, and then made some tweaks based on some extensive feedback we conducted. So next slide. It's okay. Next slide. So I guess I just wanted to also say I'm a student and I'm really fortunate to help with this process. So I'm feeling definitely some imposter syndrome here, but really excited. And we can just keep on rolling. I wanted to frame it first to next slide, that what's kind of happening in the state of New Mexico. It's unlike many of its neighboring states, meaning that the population is really small. It's incredibly diverse, but this population consists of a large amount of people who have been there ever since before the 60s. So they're families that have stayed and remained in the state and have developed this strong sense of place and community, which makes it really unique and I think has really impacted the way responsibilities and so currently our Business for Good ecosystem is pretty small. I say 9+ local B Corps because we've got a few like Banyan Botanicals, technically based somewhere else, we've got offices in New Mexico. We recently passed local benefit corporation law in New Mexico, so that's really exciting. But really, a lot of this work is involving, is kind of coming to light because of Young Anderson's New Mexico program, which is what I work for. It's a party of really one faculty that's spearheading a lot of this work and kind of trying to build momentum forward. So next slide. So there's been a few really exciting things that are happening, but I'm really going to be focusing on what we call our Business for Good consulting clinic. And so As you can see here, we've got lots of really great stuff coming up. There's the launch of the Center for Responsible Business. We're talking about creating a Be Local chapter. So a lot of things are in the mix, and I think clinics will help to drive some momentum in that space. So next slide, please. Next slide. Next slide. So those of you who run, who've done Jessica's model, have you, anyone else in the room? Yes, excellent. So this was so incredibly helpful, Jessica, like kind of starting from scratch, getting off the ground running, plenty of resources. So we did our best to follow this to the T, lots of learning on our end as well. And then next slide. So this is what it ended up looking like. So we had 8 students, we had 2 consulting teams. So it was pretty small because it was kind of a 2-sided market at first, right? We're trying to recruit companies and students. So it was a big push. It was completely virtual, and we ran it as a volunteer. So you could volunteer as a student or you can get credit as an independent study. And it was completely virtual, but the students would run their weekly client meetings, and then I would kind of sit in and attend. So next slide. So we conducted a ton of feedback during that first pilot because we knew we were, wet behind the ears, but we really wanted to make sure that this program was going to be suited to the students and the community. So we got a ton of feedback from those guys. This is some of the key highlights. But what was kind of interesting too, as a student, I was also able to incorporate some of what I was learning in courses, what other courses were doing in my program, and also learning from the Center for Teaching and Learning. Some courses there. Next slide. So from this feedback, really we had a few goals. These are kind of the 3 main ones, but we really wanted to increase value for both the students and the clients. We wanted to better support student learning because they were really overwhelmed at the beginning. It could have been partially our fault, but learning on both ends there. And then really to adjust the course in a few ways to help build a little bit more accountability and ownership. Next slide. Next slide. So we are currently writing the next iteration of the clinic now. We again have 8 students, again have 2 consulting teams, but this time we're running it as a special topics course because that was an easier lift for us through the bureaucracy of the school, as some of you probably know. But what we did a few different changes to the structure itself, where we, inspired by another class I took, where we had scheduled class every time on Friday, regardless of what stage we were in the project, so that the teams could share their updates with each other to help build a little bit of that accountability, but also cross-pollinate, so to speak. And then they had their client meetings, they had their own student meetings, so that was more hands-off for us. Next slide. So this is an attempt at a visual diagram of what some of the other components that we changed for this next iteration. We really focused heavily on skill building in the first 4 weeks because that was a big thing that our students were like, whoa, this is a lot of information. There's lots of really cool resources, but we found that they didn't really engage with that. And so, again, definitely could have been more on the teaching side of things. So we really slowed it down. And I'll highlight key components of some of these changes as we go on. So next slide. So this is a skill building component. We really focused on bringing in guest speakers to talk about different topics that would really help build the students' capacity to learn about this stuff a little bit more before they actually met with their clients, because they were a little, they definitely had a bit of imposter syndrome. It's like, well, this is, who am I to be speaking to the CEO of this company? So we really focused in on that, and we actually leaned into some of the LinkedIn Learning assessments or assignments or training programs, I guess you'd call them, to help fill in some of that work as well, and then they can put those credentials Next slide. So we did a lot of things around building accountability. I think a big focus of this was because half of the students last semester were volunteer only, so that kind of led to some tensions. So the first thing that we did, obviously, was doing a special topics course, so everyone was on the same page. But we also shifted the project agreement a little bit to extend that a little bit, so they would have a draft one due that they worked with their client the first time they met them. And then after several weeks, then they would kind of finalize that a little bit more fully and have specific outlined individual deliverables as well as team deliverables, so that it just helped a little bit with that overwhelm again, and then helped at this point at the end of the semester where folks can be like, oh yeah, did you do the thing that you said you were going to do? And then move on. We made it a mandatory site visit or in-person meeting with our client because that really helped build accountability early on in the process. It's something that we didn't do the time before. Eventually they did, they loved it. So we made that ask of the clients up front. We had weekly updates and weekly reputation index. So this is something that was brought in from another course where basically your peers are assessing you week to week on how well you're performing. To sort of make sure so as instructors, we know that there isn't a lot of social loafing going on, and we go on from there. And as I mentioned, there's lots of really cool things happening in the area, and one of them is this Pathways to Responsible Business event that we're hosting next Friday, and the students are going to be presenting there in a very public space beside a lot of the local leaders in the state, so very exciting there. Next slide. This was the next chunk. So after the skill building, we went into this kind of validation component where we brought in our host of local B Corps to speak about one area of the assessment. So it gave them an overview of their firm and then really focused in on one section. And this was really cool because the students got to know, first of all, who in the state was doing good stuff, and then really gave them a chance to connect with the local community. This is also open to the clients as well, and I thought that there'd be more interest. They didn't attend any of them, so maybe that will change in the future, but it was also open to the public, so it also had the added benefit of helping spread the word locally as well. So attendance from the general public was a little low as well, so we'll see if that goes in the future. Next slide. Great. Moving right along, basically, then we focused on impact improvement. So we, Carly Snyder, I don't know if anyone of you folks know her, she's a consultant in this area. We hired her to have office hours at a certain point as well, so they could have one-on-one time with her, which is really, really great. And then, as I mentioned, the final deliverables are happening next Friday. So next slide. I think it's been helping. We haven't formally collected results, feedback from the students this semester, but we're really excited about some of these changes. Hard to compare year to year because we don't have the same students from one semester to the next, but really, yeah, really excited, and yeah, open to comments, suggestions, feedback. Would love to open up these things more regionally, maybe. Next slide. And we can just roll through these. Perfect. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Alice. It's great to hear how you're adapting and building out the B-Impact Teams model at University of New Mexico. I know a number of us are running B-Impact Teams, and so it's great to have this opportunity to hear about other models and learn from each other. And for those of you staying for the B Corp Champions Retreat tomorrow, we'll be doing a session talking more about the B-Impact Teams model, and so we'll have folks from University of Georgia, from University of Alabama, and I'll be talking about our B-Impact Team model at North Carolina State University at 10:30 tomorrow during the B Corp Champions Retreat. So we'll get a chance to expand a bit more on that. So I'll hand it to Kristen, who also runs a B-Impact Team, to introduce our last speaker.
So thanks, Jessica. Next up, we have Sabrina Courtois, and I apologize if I'm slaughtering the French here, from Universite Catholique de Louvain. And she's going to be sharing about a team project using the BIA to teach about CSR and sustainability with first year's master's students. And they have approximately 450 students a year that take this class. We're really excited to hear from Sabrina.
Okay, thank you so much for the nice introduction. Good afternoon, everyone, and good evening to my colleagues and probably some others online. So I'm very happy to present today insight from our teaching experience at Louvain School of Management in Belgium. It's been since 2019 that we've been integrating B impact assessment and B Corp in general in our teaching with the teaching team that you can see the names of on the slide, but also some of them are with us today. But so, yeah, with no further ado, let me start presenting to you the behind the scenes of this experience. So to bring you some context, Louvain School of Management is a management school, as you may have guessed, and as part of a publicly funded university. So we are having currently more than 2,000 students in management, including more than 300 internationals. And ethics and sustainability has always been part of the vision and mission of the LSM. And so as you may see, we are part of the Principle for Responsible Management Education. And so linked to all these commitments, we have mandatory courses in corporate social responsibility. That's all our students have to go through at some point in their curriculum. And so this course is coming in all kind of shapes and languages and formats, but here let's focus on the one that's in grades B Corp since 2019. This is the one with the largest cohort. As was just said, it's almost 500 students every year. So that's the first challenge we have. And then the second is that it's a very intense one on 6 weeks. So let me now show you a little more about the pedagogy that we've been adopting to make this happen. Next slide, please. So the vision the teaching team had behind integrating B Corp was really to create a link between theoretical insights from lectures and then more concrete applications to businesses. So next to teaching students topics like macro trends of sustainable development, the SDGs, the donors economy, but also definitions of CSR, responsible supply chain, we also invite them to complete this case study through the use of B Corp and especially the B impact assessment. And so this goes through 3 different steps. First, basically the B impact assessment helps them assessing the CSR performance of the company. Then the next step based on that, but also based on all types of resources they collected on the way, is to analyze the risks and impacts of this company. And the final step is to provide recommendation to make a more impactful impact happen. And so while maintaining, of course, a critical mind all the way. So what's really important for us is that students are able to criticize their own work, but also to criticize the tools they use, even B Corp and the B impact assessment. So next slide, please. And so from a more historical perspective, so as I've told you, we've done this since 2019. And so we've tried all kinds of things since then. And so we started in 2019 with a very hands-on experience, which was a B Corp live experience with a lot of partners, 17 SMEs and also startups that were curious about B Corp. And so along those 6 weeks, they engaged actively with students to provide them with data, welcome them in the organization. That was very nice. But then COVID happened. So in 2020, we had to revise it a little bit. And so we moved to a more desktop review format with public resources. And that's also when we jumped on this opportunity to talk about this debate about multinationals and the B Corp certification. That was also very interesting. 2021, we included the SDG Action Manager that really enabled the students to see the connection between SDG, CSR, the different BIA areas. And this year, on top of all this, we adopted a sector approach. So the companies we've assigned to the students to study were part of either one of these 4 sectors, as you can see here. So it's either insurance, finance, automotive, and construction, so that they could really understand that some challenges are systemic to some sector. And so impact should, be considered there. And final thing is, again, critical perspectives. This is really something we emphasize this year. And so I will explain you a little more on the next slide. So if we put all this on a timeline, this is what our pedagogy looks like. And so first of all, we are having 3 practical sessions with students where we really teach them what B Corp is, what the B impact assessment looks like, and how they can complete it by themselves. Then we help them drafting analysis and recommendation based on this B impact assessment. And for that purpose, we really wanted students to also kind of get out the BIA, find other ideas still in the direction of sustainable impact. And so, for example, this year we used Future Fit Business Benchmark, which really helped us to show students how they can ask, let's say, the right questions to go in this direction of more impact. Then third practical session was about bringing those critical perspectives. And to do this, we welcomed alumni who did the master thesis on this topic. The first one was studying how Nespresso's B Corp certification impacted customers. What was the impact on reputation too? And the second one was looking at more controversial sectors. Can anyone become a B Corp, including companies from the brewery sector? And so all this knowledge and sessions together led to students finally delivering 3 things. First thing was a video summarizing all their key insights in 5 minutes. Then each student had to review 3 videos, which meant that everyone got a tremendous amount of feedback. And then based on all this, we did a collective debrief, which really helped also students to improve their final report and make this again in the direction of more sustainable impact. Next slide, please. All right, so some conclusion on those experiences that we've been leading since 2019. So we are academic, right? So we always like to paint nuanced pictures of our experiences. And so the first good thing is that our first objective was met. This allowed actually students to discover CSR in practice through this very accessible tool that the B impact assessment is. But then on the other hand, we found we found some struggles connecting this to our theoretical insights. So these are a few challenges, but rooms for improvement that we are seeing. Also, students have been able to develop tremendous amount of skills, innovation, entrepreneurship, critical thinking, but also having this systemic thinking of all the facets of CSR, which the B impact assessment really clearly shows. But then on the other hand, there are some aspects and some structure in the BIA that let's say naturally lead students or maybe more naive users to fall in some traps. For example, having this race for scores, like, okay, if I do this or that, I can have this more score and so maybe become a B Corp. Or also the fact that the BIA is structured in different parts makes the collaboration in teams of 5 to 6, you split it all among those. So sometimes the collaboration was more in silos than what we expected. So along the years, we also tried to cope with this and solve this. Next slide, please. And this will be my final one. It's about more of the impacts outside the classroom. And so very quickly here, we've had since 2019 more than 30 master theses on B Corp. All of them or most of them are public, by the way. So if you're interested, feel free to check them out. We've also had some surveys with students saying that actually they wanted to integrate B Corp or sustainability consideration at large in their professional choices more and more, thanks to this exercise. We had some of the companies from the 2019 edition actually getting certified since we worked with them. So here are 2 examples here, Shaip and Simon Assoif. And you can also see that Simon Assoif can be found in the other part of the slide, where actually some of our student consultant association have helped them. So association have also tackled this issue by themselves and took the knowledge we shared with them during lectures to build their own consulting services. And finally, and this will be my very last point, we have been engaging actively with the business world. As you may know, in Europe and in Belgium, for example, B Corp was not so well developed a few years ago, but it's really been increasing tremendously. And so we've been part of those initiatives at the time when there were only 9 B Corps in Belgium, shaping the way towards the certification. And so today we have almost 50 B Corp in Belgium. So this has been one of the reasons we have continued using this and improving it over the years, while keeping in mind all of the aspects that I've just mentioned to you. So thank you all, and yeah, very happy to answer any questions if we have time or collect opinions.
We do have time. Thank you, Sabrina. And thanks to all of our presenters for being so prompt. We know that's been a fire hose of information with not much time for discussion. And thanks to Sabrina, we now have a little bit of time. So we're going to do 2 questions. I'll moderate one from the folks here on Zoom, and Jessica will be moderating one from folks present in the room. So folks here on Zoom, if you have a question, or a point of discussion, can you put it in the meeting chat and I will read it out for Sabrina.
As we're waiting for questions from Zoom, we can see if there are any questions in the room, but I also wanted to say thank you so much as well for all the presenters for this teaching session. Fantastic. And indeed a fire hose. I think we're just starting the conversation here, and then a lot of follow-up and to be continued, as well as sharing of resources. So quick question here in the room.
I have one that is probably not fair, but from all of the presenters, like, congratulations, this is really, really great work. I'm wondering, in hearing other people present, what common threads you saw, even though we're, approaching it from different angles. I'm just curious, like, to the presenters, what common thread did you hear that might be helpful for us as a group?
Maybe like openness for collaboration. I think that's a really big theme so far for the day in general. I think this community is already set up really well for that. Our first engagement, is Jessica being like, here's all the things you need. So just paying that forward, I think that's really beautiful and really wonderful. It's been really great to hear about all the innovative things people have been doing today.
Thank you.
Alice?
I think I've also heard a theme of like making it relevant for students and slowing it down for the students. It's a lot of information, right? That we sort of roll out. Even for us, we're like, oh wait, did you hear? Like we're like Googling the things up on the thing. I'm like, I didn't know about that. And so we're always trying to like pack everything that we learn like into a course. And sometimes it's better to just meet students where they are. With the best tools, and I like that we're all open to experimentation and trying things out. But I think it's great. I think that it's nice that we're all students with our students.
Sabrina on online has a comment, a question.
Yeah, no question, just another argument maybe, but I also join yours. So I was also about to mention the focus on not only knowledge, but also skills and competencies, and collaboration was one of them, but then also critical thinking, systemic thinking. I could also find those in your presentation. So I think it's also a very important angle we have to keep in our minds when we teach.
The other common thread that I heard was, really developing, the thinking behind it. I think, of really challenging our students. And again, it goes back to slowing down because everything is so fast anyway. And we actually at Drexel are on the quarter system, so it makes it even quicker. And within design disciplines and within the design industry, it's like you just like chunk. And it's just like, can we just slow down to think further out and that's what I heard everyone, kind of that common thread of and iterating and kind of reflecting. Mm-hmm. And I think that's this reflective practice, not only is in your personal life, if you choose to have a reflective practice, but a reflective practice in academia. So we as academics, like reflecting on what worked, what didn't work, how are we going to iterate and change? How then do we go ask for help? And we mirror that for our students. So that's what I heard was common amongst us.
Great question, and thank you for all of those shares. It's looking like we don't yet have any questions from online, is what I'm seeing. So definitely want to make sure that we're engaging the folks who are participating online. But if not,
There's not a question, but there's a comment that just popped up. Alan Gunderson shared good point on the importance of having a reflective practice.
absolutely. Thank you, Alan. So, Kristen, do you have time for one more question? I know you want to do a wrap up, or do you want to go straight to?
Just I'll leave that up to you, given the timing of the next session as well.
I would say let's go ahead and wrap up. I'm trying to think about how to implement the slowing down.
And being reflective.
Do you want to try to get one more question in, or if we just want to like take a breath?
A break.
A breath, and then I know Kristen will wrap up this session. So and then we'll give ourselves some time to have some more conversation and communication. And again, I think this is just the beginning, right, of this conversation. We'll continue. So Kristen, I'll hand it to you to wrap this up.
And as it turns out, one of the things that I was going to share is directly in response to Jake's question. So the thread that I saw is that it seems like folks who are teaching about B Corps are not only offering important and impactful information, we're also creating engaging and empowering experiences for our students. So in hopes of building a sense of community and connection and collaboration and the spirit of welcoming everyone to the growing movement of B academics, for those of you who are new, we invite everyone, whether you're in person there in Philly or you're here online, to continue this conversation by doing so in the B Academics LinkedIn. And I've pasted the link a couple times in the chat, but I'll paste it again as soon as I finish talking. And there are three things that I'd like to do as our teaching roundtable comes to the end. First thing I'd like to do is to thank you all for joining us today. It has been such a delight and joy to connect with you around the best practices in teaching about B Corps and the B Corp movement. Secondly, I'd like to ask that you please complete an online form that we've created. It has just 3 quick questions about how we can best support your teaching needs. And again, I'll be sharing that link in the Zoom chat, and it'll be sent to everyone in an email follow-up. And then lastly, the third thing is I'd like to ask you to please keep your eye out for that email follow-up. There will be information as to where to find the recordings and the slides from each of today's sessions. So a few final quick reminders. We'd love for you to get more involved by joining one of our committees. And it goes without saying that if you're not already a member, we'd love for you to join us and invite your colleagues to do so soon. So there is no break between this session and the research roundtable. It's beginning immediately following. So I'm going to pass it back to Jessica, and she's going to launch